Deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro declares himself innocent and a decent man after he pleaded not guilty yesterday to federal drug trafficking charges. Maduro was making his first appearance in an American courtroom on the narco-terrorism charges the Trump administration used to justify capturing him and his wife over the weekend and bringing them to New York. The judge overseeing the case will now schedule further proceedings with future hearings planned as the case enters a lengthy legal process. So let's look at how we got to this point with Renard Sexton, Associate Professor of Political Science at Emory University. Welcome to you. A lot of people may be thinking, what's going on? Why would the U.S. do that? So when you zoom out, does this moment feel like a break from history to you?
Well, the U.S. has had tensions with Venezuela now for more than 2 decades. Back in the late 1990s, the U.S. and Venezuela had pretty good relations, and indeed the U.S. was a major market for Venezuelan oil. But then in 1999, Hugo Chavez took power, and he was the predecessor to Nicolas Maduro. And Chavez was a leftist leader, an avowed socialist, who rejected the U.S. and U.S. influence in not only Venezuela, but throughout Latin America. And this has brought on 2.5 decades of sort of cat and mouse between the United States and Venezuela. Now, in 2013, Hugo Chavez died of cancer, and one of his lieutenants, Nicolas Maduro, took over in his place. Now, the challenge, of course, for Venezuela is that they've experienced a long economic decline, in part related to the oil industry there, which has really struggled to reach the highs that it had in the late 1990s. But throughout that period, you've had people in the United States who oppose both the socialist regime in Cuba as well as in Venezuela. And so the capture that took place really is a culmination of 25 years of tension between Washington and the socialist regime in Caracas.
So Nicolas Maduro often framed the U.S. as an imperial threat. Does this actually validate that narrative for some people?
Well, certainly when you saw the UN Security Council meeting, countries around the world condemned the U.S. Operation because it violated the UN Charter, which says basically you don't go violate the territorial integrity of other countries and capture their leaders. So in that sense, the U.S. has certainly violated many norms, a major norm that has existed since the end of World War II. Now, a handful of countries like Argentina, Ecuador supported the operation, but in general, even U.S. allies struggled to describe the U.S.'s actions in anything other than negative terms.
You think this kind of reopens some old wounds across the region?
Throughout the region, yes. I mean, certain observers have hearkened back to the 19th century U.S. what we called gunboat diplomacy, in which, for example, the nation of Panama used to be actually a part of Colombia, and it was through U.S. Navy coercion that Panama sort of became independent and was effectively a U.S. sort of protectorate. And indeed, the U.S. controlled the Panama Canal for many, many decades. So there is this history of the United States military dictating terms throughout Latin America, and this particular operation certainly brings back many of those unwanted memories.
All right, so now that this action has been taken, let's look forward. Really quick here, where do you see the politics of Venezuela and all of Latin America going in regards to the U.S.?
Well, there's a real challenge because every nation in Latin America relies on the U.S. in certain ways. Some are close allies, and there are very dedicated security relationships. Other places rely on the U.S. as a major market for their exports. The U.S. is just too big to ignore for countries in the region. On the other hand, there's, I think, a genuine worry that the United States will become more coercive. President Trump has in fact stated that Cuba and Colombia, which currently has a left-wing leader, are potentially next in terms of military coercion. He's also talked about what he called a second strike in Venezuela if its current new leaders don't play ball with the United States. So it's not just a one and done. There's a fear that there's going to be a broader set of coercive actions. And I'll note that the national security strategy that was published by the United States recently under the Trump administration
this
called the Western Hemisphere.
Stunning moves taking place surrounding deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro are bringing major ripple effects, not just for that South American nation, but also here in the U.S. and in Metro Atlanta, to be specific. Joining us now is Santiago Marquez, CEO of the Latin American Association, to break down what this all means. Good morning to you, Santiago. We appreciate you joining us here. I want to ask you, first off, what are you hearing from fellow Venezuelans here in Metro Atlanta? Are people more shocked, or is there relief, fear, or do you feel like it's a mix of emotion, perhaps?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. Great question. And on Saturday, when all of this happened, I reached out to friends of mine that are from Venezuela, and the feedback that I got was they were very happy, very excited, very nervous about what was coming next. Yesterday, I was able to talk to some employees that are from Venezuela, and one in particular who had checked with her mother, had a conversation with her mother, and I think their feeling is, what's going to happen now? They seem to feel like everything was moving along in Venezuela, business as usual, that the streets were pretty quiet. But the sense I'm getting is a lot of relief in one sense, and then what's going to happen now? What's the future look like in Venezuela? That's what I'm hearing from my friends, employees, and then I really haven't been able to talk to our clients yet, but I'm looking forward to doing that.
Well, have you heard from any of them about any concerns about possible retaliation or backlash, specifically for those people who have loved ones still in Venezuela?
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say that we have served about 5,000 Venezuelans over the last couple of years, especially with the new arrival situation. And so I know that we were getting a lot of phone calls yesterday about their own status, the people that are here that were like on TPS, and wondering what does this mean for them now? Do they have to leave? Do they have to go back to the country immediately? A lot of confusion, I think, around their own status and what it means for them returning to their country.
Yeah, I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions, especially as the CEO of the group here in Atlanta. How is your group preparing to support those people in Venezuela, specifically the families here who, again, have loved ones back in the country?
Right. So the main work that we do is social services, right? And so we focus on 3 areas, which is stabilizing families, supporting them with food, with financial assistance for utilities. We also have immigration services, and I think that's been instrumental in terms of serving the Venezuelan community over the last couple of years. And so what we're really ramping up to do now is to field a lot of questions on, again, people that were here, that had gotten here recently, that had, that TPS, and what does it mean for them now in terms of, are they able to stay in the country? Do they have some time to stay, or do they have to go back? Trying to help them through all of that and help them understand what their rights are, as well as working with their families here. So we're anxious to see what's coming, but we're ramping up now in terms of immigration support.
So does it seem like you're seeing more people get more engaged because of what's going on?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And people are hopeful for the future. At least that's what I'm hearing. They're hoping for the best, but they're nervous about what's happening. They want to see change in their country for the most part, I think. Definitely the people that are here, that are in exile here, want to see change in their country. And some of them want to return to their country, but they want to return to their country knowing that there's a stable government that allows them to have opportunities to grow.
In Santiago, before you go, you're having a lot of these conversations. What are you telling people as they have those fears? What takeaway are you giving them? Because there is still so much uncertain. This is still very much an evolving story.
Yeah, for them, I think it's important for them to know that we're here to serve them, that we can provide basic services for them and their families while they're here. And again, I think the most important thing is to have a consultation with them if there's any doubts around their own particular status in the country, because I think that's the one thing that makes them uneasy more than it.
As many of us recover from the holidays, the bills are just starting to hit. And for a lot of us, that means trying to dig out of a mountain of debt. New numbers from the American Institute of CPAs found almost half of holiday spenders expect to be borrowing to cover the costs tied to gifts and things like travel. More than half of those surveyed won't pay off their credit card balance in full when the bill arrives. And nearly 4 in 10 feel regret over holiday overspending and carry that emotional toll with them. All right, so let's get some tips on paying that debt down that you may have gotten yourself into over the holiday with local financial professional Abby Reed, co-CEO of Reed Financial Group. Welcome to you, Abby. Let's jump right into it. What is the biggest myth about holiday debt that holds people back?
I think that it can start to feel really overwhelming. And a lot of times we hear people say, they don't think they're going to be able to get out from under it. And so it can be really discouraging. And that doesn't have to be the case. There are certainly ways to plan, whether you kind of knew what debt you were taking on and did it knowingly, or whether it just piled up without you really understanding what was going on. There are definitely methods that can help you get out from under that. So I would encourage people to just kind of try and flip that mindset that can be really discouraging and prevent people from starting to tackle any type of debt.
So what's the number one thing you tell someone who's right now, they're staring long and hard at that credit card bill? What should they do first?
First, you really need to be honest with yourself. If you're married, then you and your spouse can sit down, or if you're not, have a money date with yourself and take a look at all of your debt. So whether you're a pen and paper person, you can write it all down, or whether you're more, a digital person, you can create an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet and take actual inventory of all of your debt. So that's going to be your mortgage, your car payments, your credit card payments, personal loans, those type things. So what I recommend is to write the company, the amount, and the interest rate. So the average interest rate, or APR, is about 24% on credit cards. And this is going to help you to be able to see everything clearly, because it can really add up, especially if you have multiple credit cards. If you signed up for a credit card to take advantage of, a particular offer or to get bonus miles, it can get out of control. And so having an inventory is the first step. And then you can pick a method. There's several that you can pick, and it really needs to be what works for you and your family. So there's the avalanche method, and then there's the snowball method as well. And they're going to work differently for different people. But the first step is always taking that inventory.
Talking about inventory, how important is it for people to prioritize high interest debt first? And what's kind of the strategy there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's the avalanche method. So I just mentioned the avalanche method and the snowball method. So the avalanche method is when you start with prioritizing the highest interest rate debt. So that's going to be credit cards and personal loans. Those typically have double-digit interest rates. And that is what we call it, at Reed Financial Group, a wealth killer. That really sucks your ability to build wealth, to add to your retirement accounts, to make sure you have a good emergency fund. And it's really hard to get out from under that, especially if you're only paying the minimum payment or just paying the interest. It can take years to get out from under that. So with the avalanche method, you start to attack the highest interest rate debt first. That's going to be, as far as the financial impact, that's going to save you the most money and help you pay the least amount of interest. Now, it might take a little bit longer because that might not be the smallest debt that you have. And so it can be a little bit discouraging. So the other method, the snowball method, works better for people that need to see a win in order to stick with something. So if that's you, which a lot of us are, then pick the snowball method. That's going to be starting to attack the lowest debt first, the lowest dollar amount first, getting that off of your balance sheet, and then going from there. So there's two different methods, and the avalanche method is financially makes the most sense, but sometimes the snowball method is the one that people are going to stick with more. Either one is fine. You have to pick the one that's right for you. But the high interest rate debt it gets in the way of that and getting to retirement, which is what we help people with. And so that's the main problem with it.
The showdown between the Hoosiers and the Ducks expected to bring tens of thousands of out-of-town fans along with major dollars into Atlanta during a key post-holiday travel window. So let's talk about all of this, the potential economic impact and the boom with Kyle Townsend, clinical assistant professor at Georgia State University's Hospitality Administration. Welcome to you. So glad to have you here on this Friday. We're getting ready for this big matchup tonight. So when you have a major bowl game like the Peach Bowl coming to Atlanta, we always talk about economic impact, but where do we really see it first?
Well, good morning. It's really exciting to be here with you and your viewers. The economic impact of an event like the Peach Bowl, especially with it being the semifinal for the college football playoffs, is going to be broad, and we'll see it across the city. We'll kind of see this coming in waves, right? Starting with folks arriving at the airport, moving out into their hotels, using our dining restaurants and different recreation and attractions across the city. So we stand to benefit a ton by hosting an event like this.
Yeah, and do you see this more as a tourism boost or, maybe a local spending surge? We know both teams, a lot of them traveling from far away to be here.
Yeah, and so when we see an example like this where the teams are both coming from really far away, and in this case, both really excited fan bases who are super hungry for the opportunity to play for the national championship, this is kind of like the best case scenario for event managers, destination managers. What we want to see is folks coming from far away because then they need to travel to get here. They tend to use hotel facilities and stay a little bit longer associated with something like this. So the event managers in Atlanta, the city, they are super excited to have these two teams who are both, like I said, really hungry for a chance at that national championship, coming to Atlanta to experience what the city has to offer and the great opportunities in the hospitality industry here. Yeah,
and you mentioned the hotels. Obviously, they have to stay somewhere, but what types of businesses tend to benefit the most? Is it the hotels?
Well, the hotels are a big part of it. So interestingly, the way that the hospitality industry is set up is that night stays at a hotel sort of help influence what Atlanta goes out and is able to bring in terms of events. So it's like a little bit of a snowball rolling down the hill where we kind of get folks in and then use that money to go get new events, as we've seen hosting things like the FIFA Club World Cup rolling into the World Cup and all the great mega events we've had in the city, like the Super Bowl, for example. So the hotels are one of the big ones, but ultimately the restaurant industry, the nightlife industry across the board, we're going to see lots more going on in downtown and a great opportunity for the city to capitalize on.
Yeah, and when it comes to hospitality here in Atlanta, what do you think the city does well when we're hosting games like this and other big events?
Well, so a lot of different things that we do really well, and that's what kind of makes us the home of Southern hospitality, right? What we do in Atlanta is that we have the benefit of having a ton of bandwidth, right? So we have the world's busiest airport. We have so much hotel opportunities downtown. We also have exceptional restaurants and then all kinds of things for people to do outside of the game. I'm a researcher for my job, and some of the research I do is on customer and fan satisfaction with events. And a remarkable amount of satisfaction actually comes not inside the stadium, right? I mean, one team is going to win and the other fans are not going to be happy about that, but they can still have had an awesome time in Atlanta if the stakeholders understand that the majority of that can actually occur outside of the stadium itself.
All right, so, before we go, I do want to ask you this. When it all is said and done, when the final whistle blows tonight, how do we know if the Peach Bowl was a success economically for Atlanta?
So we'll look at this in like a little bit of a lag, right? We will be able to more carefully assess the actual economic impacts 6 months down the road, a year down the road. We know from doing that in years past that the Peach Bowl is a huge economic impact for the city of Atlanta. And ultimately, I kind of think the way that this year has set up, I suspect that this year will be kind of a record breaker for the city of Atlanta. We have two really hungry fan bases. They're traveling from far away. They're going to come enjoy our Southern hospitality. And Atlanta's going to show them and send them home wanting to come back and visit, whether it's for another sporting event or for all the other things that we have going on.
The criminal charges against ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro are explosive. U.S. prosecutors say this wasn't just corruption. They allege this was a narco-terror operation that pushed massive amounts of cocaine into the United States. Here are the charges federal prosecutors say back that up. Prosecutors allege Maduro led a criminal enterprise using drug trafficking to fund and advance violent groups and coordinated large-scale shipments of cocaine destined for the U.S. They say he allegedly supplied armed groups with weapons and political protection to keep those drug routes open and use Venezuela's government, military, and airports to facilitate trafficking. Federal prosecutors say this was a years-long operation. Maduro has pleaded not guilty and argues he's still a sitting head of state, a claim that could become central to his defense. Let's look at the charges now with noted criminal defense attorney and former Fulton County Assistant DA Daryl Cohen. Daryl, good morning to you. Walk us through these charges, especially the term narco-terrorism.
Good morning. How are you? Well, this is simple at its face and complicated as we get there. First of all, we have to know, was Maduro captured or kidnapped? They're not mutually exclusive. And there is a lot of disagreement as to whether or not our reaching out to Venezuela and bringing him back to the United States was legal. Does it remind you perhaps of Noriega in Panama 30 years ago? Perhaps. So narco-terrorism is a very serious charge. And you have to remember, this is not the first time he's been indicted. In 2020, he was also indicted. We didn't get him at that time. We've got him now. And the charges have to be proven. It's easy to charge, and at some point, the jury is going to say guilty in all likelihood, or perhaps not guilty. So it's incumbent upon the attorneys, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the prosecutors, to prove beyond and to every reasonable doubt that Maduro is guilty. And that would be 12 men and women on that jury. And a lot of what happens probably has to do with the 12 people individually, what they believe is correct. We've seen a lot of action since he was taken. Many people are glad that he's gone, but being glad that he's gone is not tantamount to liking or agreeing with the way he was gone. Having said that, how else would the United States get Maduro? He certainly wasn't going to turn himself in. Clearly, he did not expect that the United States would exercise an incursion and grab him. As many of us know, he was trying to get in his safe room, but he was unable to do it. And now he's safely ensconced in the United States.
And Daryl, so how strong do you think is the argument that Maduro should have immunity as a sitting head of state?
Sitting heads of state are not immune from committing crimes. They are people, some good, some bad. Some have a little bit of piece of good, a piece of bad. But the fact that he is or was the president of Venezuela does not give him immunity from committing crimes. That's just the way it is. And what concerns me is the way we got him. What happens if another country believes that our president, whether it's Trump or someone else, has committed a crime, and they come in and they grab him from the United States? Is that appropriate? Could that happen? Yes. Is it likely to happen? Absolutely not. But those are part of the questions that are posed to all of us in the system, and we wonder what is going to happen next. But the fact he's a president, so what? He can't commit a crime. He's not above the law.
All right, so 30 seconds left here. Tell us, how long could a case like this realistically take to play out?
Depending on how much evidence they have, depending on his lawyers, depending on the United States lawyers, this could start in a couple of months, though I doubt it, because it's going to take a lot of time for his lawyers to know what's going on, for him to fill them in, giving him a defense. It could take 6 months, it could take 2 or 3 years, but they're going to move it quickly.
The CDC announcing a major change to its childhood vaccine recommendations, cutting back on what's routinely advised for all kids and now shifting more to decisions to parents and doctors to make those choices. Here's a look at what some of the changes are. The CDC is reducing the number of diseases it recommends vaccinating against for children from 17 to now down to 11. Several vaccines, including here for flu, COVID, rotavirus, and hepatitis A and B, will now depend on shared decision-making between families and their doctors. Some vaccines are now recommended only for children with certain risk factors such as RSV and meningitis. And all vaccines listed by the CDC will still be covered by insurance at no cost. So several big changes to talk about. So we're going to bring in Professor Benjamin Loatman from Emory University's Department of Epidemiology. Dr. Loatman, glad to have you here this morning. So let's start with the big question. How significant is this change?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. This is a really significant change to our vaccine policy in this country. And what I would say is it's entirely unnecessary. Those of us in the vaccine community, researchers, are surprised by it, and because there's no new science about the vaccines. Nothing has changed. This is really a political decision. The science has not changed. Only the politics have, really.
Yeah, it certainly is controversial, to say the least. But does the language that we now see perhaps signal to some parents that the vaccines are less important, at least some of them?
I worry that will be the signal, and that's unfortunate. We know what happens when vaccine coverage decreases. More kids get sick, more hospitalizations occur, even more deaths. And the really troubling thing about this is how this decision, this policy change was made. I worked at CDC for many years and worked on vaccines and vaccine policy, and I can tell you how much rigorous science, careful policy deliberation went into constructing this vaccine schedule with the idea of protecting kids when they're most vulnerable. And Secretary Kennedy, and now with the endorsement of the CDC, has really undermined this process. And without input from vaccine scientists and public health experts, I mean, it's really sweeping unilateral change that I fear is going to have real consequences.
Well, you speak of those consequences. What are you most worried about? I mean, obviously, if fewer people get vaccinated, we could then see, in turn, certain rates go up with some of these illnesses. What are you most concerned about?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the concern, is that this is entirely unnecessary and will lead to preventable illness and death. And we know when vaccine coverage falls, sickness, illness increases, and we're seeing the effects already of falling coverage. And look at what's happening with whooping cough and measles in our communities. I can tell you something that I've worked on over my career, rotavirus vaccines, and before we had this vaccine in this country, 50,000 kids a year were hospitalized with severe diarrhea from rotavirus, and vaccination cut that by 80 to 90%. And if we see, preventable hospitalizations from diseases like that and other vaccine preventable diseases, it would be an entirely unnecessary tragedy for babies and their parents.
And so, Dr. Loatman, what do you say to those parents who are watching right now and they hear guidance from their personal physician, then they hear other guidance from perhaps the federal government, the CDC, and they're confused about what to do? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, as a vaccine scientist, the first thing I would say is if you've already vaccinated your kids, there's nothing to be concerned about here. The science hasn't changed. Our understanding of how well these vaccines work, that they're the best way to protect your kids, and they're very safe. That hasn't changed. If you haven't vaccinated your kids yet, if you have young children, I would to do so, and also look at what the professional organizations like the American Academy for Pediatrics are recommending. That the doctors and scientists who see young kids, they're recommending universal use of these vaccines still.
What was supposed to be a routine landing at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport turned dramatic. A Boeing 767-300ER jet bound from Peru touched down Tuesday in Atlanta, only to have multiple tires on the main landing gear burst or blow out as soon as they hit the runway. No injuries reported, thankfully, but the images in question still linger this morning. So what causes something like this, and how rare is it? Joining us this morning is Lori Garrow, assistant professor in the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering and noted aviation expert, to kind of help us break down what could have happened and what this means for airline safety. Thanks for being with us, Lori. So based on what you've learned from this incident, what are your early takeaways on what could have went wrong here?
Hi, good morning. Well, first, thank you for having me. And yeah, as with any accident, or incident, we look at multiple factors. One way I like to think about this is what could have caused it is think about the tires on your car, and when the tires on your car start getting blowouts, right? So heavy weight, right? So if the aircraft was coming in with particularly low heavy cargo or fuel, heavy weight, that could have contributed. A very hard landing could also have impacted it. So if you're looking, for instance, at coming down very hard, it puts extra pressure on the tires. Also, you can think about pressure changes. So if there were some temperature changes or extra friction coming in, that could have impacted the integrity of the tires. So multiple factors there.
So could a hard landing alone cause multiple tires to fail?
Yeah, definitely. Think about it like on your car going over a speed bump really, really fast, right? And coming back down. So yeah, a hard landing, most likely combined with the weight issue, because an international aircraft is a very heavy aircraft as well. So, but yes, I agree. Hard landing could have done it.
So let's say if things were normal, right? How much stress do landing gear tires actually take during a normal touchdown?
I don't actually know that question. I don't know the answer to that one. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. But when the tires actually blow on landing, what are some of the most common things that you would do sort of in response here? Is this a situation where you just sort of let it happen and go through as they did here, or is there a backup to the backup, if you will?
Yeah, so the aircraft are designed for failures of multiple landing gear when the tires go. In this case, the main important thing is to make sure that you can land safely in the distance in the runway, right? You want to be able to make sure you can still slow the aircraft down and get it stopped on time. So the design of the aircraft when that happens is to proceed and make sure you're stopping safely.
All right, so does an incident like this indicate a broader safety concern? We've had quite a few, aircraft concern over the last, let's just say, year. Do you think this paints a bigger picture or possibly a one-off?
Well, I think the odds of a single tire blowing out are about 1 in 100,000. So to have two simultaneously is really a rare event. When that happens, it triggers an investigation. So FAA and possibly other agencies will be looking at, diagnosing exactly what happened, and if they find something that needs to change, be it the maintenance or policies and procedures, those will come out as recommendations and changes for the airline industry. So in my sense, I don't think this is broader or indicative of larger issues. In some cases, if we're flying more aircraft in the air, which we have been doing now versus 10 years ago, inevitably we're going to see more pop up. But this one was rare.
What would you say would be some of the key takeaways for passengers after seeing an incident like this?
So I can only talk from my personal experience. So when I see an incident like this, I do get nervous traveling the next time I'm on a flight. But what I always remind myself is that air transportation is the safest mode of transportation, in part because of what I noted. When we do have incidents like this, we do full investigations, learn from it, incorporate it going forward. We have great engineers, designing the plane to think through if something like this happens, how are we going to, keep passengers, crew safe, get them evacuated, which, was the case here. So I always remind myself there's great people building it, great, staff on board protecting us, and aviation's the safest mode.
Fulton County leaders this week laid out their plans for the event, touching on everything from infrastructure, security, and the overall economic impact. So let's dive deeper into all of this with the man who is the top dog here in Fulton County Chairman Rob Pitts. Chairman Pitts, it's always good to have you on. So let's talk about this. For people who may not actually go to the Benz to attend a match, why should they still care about all of these preparations?
Well, I think it's important for the citizens of Fulton County to care, because some 300,000 people, foreign visitors, are going to be here in the heart of Fulton County for these games. And that's a great opportunity for me in particular to continue to promote and expose Fulton County, Georgia, all of the benefits of Fulton County to leadership from the world. from the point of view of them knowing what a great place Fulton County is to visit, what a great place it is to live in, and more importantly, what a great place Fulton County is to set up a business. So that's why it's so important to us. The games, that's a fun thing. Everybody loves sports, but I'm looking at it more from an economic development point of view.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what part of the World Cup planning actually falls on Fulton County itself?
Well, unfortunately, Fulton County is not a part of the official host committee. But what we are doing, though, we're going to be called upon to provide, working with the other agencies and cities around security. So that means that our sheriff's department will be involved, our marshals will be involved, our police department will be involved. But more importantly, our emergency management people will be involved, because again, you have 300,000 people coming. The last thing we want to have happen in our county is some unfortunate event to happen and us not be prepared. And to that extent, the other agency, Fulton County agency, that really will have a role to play is our Fulton County Health Department. We will be on standby, ready to roll. And things as small as there's going to be a huge number of food trucks set up to accommodate the people who are here. So just think about that, inspecting food, all of these food trucks and food establishments that will be set up. So we will have a role to play, although not necessarily an official role.
Yeah, Chairman, I was thinking about it. You've been in office here in the metro area for 45 years between City Council and, the Fulton County Commission. So you've seen Super Bowls, you were here for the Olympics, other big events. What lessons has the city learned or Fulton County learned when it comes to managing crowds that they'll use for the big crowds we'll see for the World Cup?
We're an expert at this. We have the facilities. We know what to do. We know traffic control, public safety, health. We've been through it before. That's why we continue to get, and we have the great facilities, not only the sports and athletic venues, but also our hotels. We have great hospitality city, so we're prepared. We're ready. As you point out, we have the experience, and we're ready to go.
All right.
And the other thing is our airport, the Fulton County Airport. There will be some 250 to 300 flights. More flights coming to Fulton County Airport. So we're set to go there. We've undergone a major expansion there. We're going to have customs facilities set up there. So I'm excited about where we are and the opportunities for Fulton County, Georgia.
Chairman Pitts, I have a quick question for you. News just broke not too long ago that one of your commissioners, Dana Barrett's going to be running for Secretary of State. She was going to be challenging you for your seat. Your term ends this year. Are you still planning to run for county commission? You've been in office for more than 45 years. Are you running again? That's the big question.
Absolutely. Let's be crystal clear about that. Full of vigor, ready to go. Energetic, excited, have work to do here at Fulton County. So absolutely, positively, yes.
New questions are growing along with outrage after a woman was shot and killed by a federal ICE agent in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here's what we know so far. The woman, now identified as 37-year-old Renee Good, was shot in her car in a residential neighborhood there just south of downtown Minneapolis. Federal officials say the agent acted in self-defense and are continuing to investigate. However, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey called the federal government's description of the events garbage, and the city's police chief gave no indication that the driver was trying to harm anyone when she described the shooting to reporters. For perspective here, let's bring in Georgia NAACP President Gerald Griggs. Gerald, when you look at this video, which is pretty graphic, and the federal explanation that came right after, what immediately stands out to you here?
Immediately stands out is whether or not self-defense is available here. It appears what was happening was there was some sort of ICE raid or some type of ICE activity in the community, and this young lady was in her car. The car was stopped by ICE for some reason, and then she appears to try to drive away from the ICE agent, and then the shooting occurs. So there are some serious questions on whether or not this is a justifiable shooting, whether or not ICE had the right to detain or stop a United States citizen. And when I saw the video, I was definitely concerned. I think that the narrative that's being put out by ICE right now is not correct. I think there needs to be a thorough, independent investigation to get to the bottom of what happened, and I think that transparency needs to happen in this case. So I think it's too early to determine what actually happened or whether this is a justifiable shooting. There needs to be an outside agency to conduct the investigation.
Yeah, because if you think of the governing body, they're the ones that are coming out with the immediate response. So you got to kind of separate that there. Tell us, what do you think about how this incident actually fits into the broader national conversation that we've talked so much with you about when it comes to law enforcement, federal authority, and the use of force?
I think it continues that conversation, and it's, very concerning that this event happened only a few blocks away from one of the biggest events in 2020, which was George Floyd. So I think that there is a long way that we have to go to rebuild trust. I think ICE needs to be more transparent and turn this investigation over to the local authorities. I'm sure in Minnesota, Minneapolis, after what happened with George Floyd, they have an ability to investigate this through the state's attorney's office and get to the bottom of whether or not charges will be filed. My other concern is, from information that I'm receiving, this young lady may have been one of those people that are legal observers to observe what ICE was doing with the community there with the raids. So there are some serious questions, serious legal questions that need to be answered, and it has to be done by an outside independent organization, not the ones who are allegedly responsible for the shooting.
And just taking it down a layer here, when you have these incidents, and we saw how many people were on that scene and witnessed this interaction, you have to think about the people left behind to live in these communities. What message do cases like this actually send to communities of color and immigrants?
It's exactly what the national conversation is. They feel like there's an over-policing happening in brown and black communities. This underscores that because there were ongoing federal immigration raids happening over and over again in this city. The local citizens and the local government did not want those interactions in the city, and now we see an escalation to a deadly use of force. I think it underscores what African American communities and communities of color have been saying for years. There's an over-policing in the community. They need to step back and reassess how you do this. You can maintain law and order, and you can also enforce the laws, but you don't have to over-police or militarize the police, as we see with these raids. So I just think that at this point, the stronger national conversation, especially at the federal level, is to rethink how they do these things. We are a country of laws. American citizens have rights. Those detained have due process rights. We cannot trample those rights to enforce the law.
And lastly, what do you think viewers should be watching out for next as this investigation continues?
I think that you will see more angles of the shooting. There were hundreds of witnesses on the street who were giving witness accounts, who had cell phone recordings. My question is, how come, if the government is trying to justify this meaning ICE trying to justify this, I do believe that ICE agents have either GoPros or body-worn cameras. Release all of the information if you're going to make public statements and public pronouncements. Otherwise, be quiet, allow the investigation to run its course, and an independent determination of whether or not this is a justifiable shooting.
When you don't feel well, you don't always start with a doctor anymore. You start with a question. That's right, millions of people are now turning to artificial intelligence to make sense of symptoms, prescriptions, and a healthcare system that can feel overwhelming at times. In fact, a recent survey conducted by OpenAI found that more than 40 million people worldwide use ChatGPT every day for health-related questions. Data cited in the report shows that more than half of those who responded admitted to using AI to check or explore symptoms. The same OpenAI report survey found 48% use it to understand medical terminology and about 44% to learn about treatment options. So let's look at this shift to AI for more answers to your questions when it comes to health with the Chief Marketing Officer at OpenAI, Kate Rao. It is so good to have you here with us this morning. Let's start with this. We know a lot of people just kind of type in their phones or their computers looking for these answers with ChatGPT when it comes to healthcare questions. So what's your reaction to those numbers I just mentioned? Millions of people now doing this.
Yeah, so we are seeing that millions of people are using ChatGPT, as you mentioned, for health and wellness related questions. That's everything from preparing for doctor's visits, which is actually one of the biggest use cases that we see, really making the most out of that kind of those precious few minutes that you do have with your doctor. Navigating health insurance, so helping get denials overturned, helping understand different coverage plans, and then finally navigating your own kind of personal wellness goals, things like take a picture of my plate and help me understand the macros or calories in this plate, and how should I eat differently for the rest of the day if I eat this, as an example.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you measure the accuracy of all of this when it comes to health responses, especially in the climate that we're in, when sometimes medical consensus on things can be different and can change?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So let me just back up to let you guys know that this week we launched 2 new things for ChatGPT and health. The first thing is for everyday people, and that's a new private space inside ChatGPT where you can bring together your medical records, wellness apps, fitness trackers to get more personal answers about your specific health and wellness questions. And then for healthcare systems, we expanded OpenAI for healthcare, which is really all about helping hospital systems bring AI into clinical care. So, some of the biggest and best hospitals in the country, like Memorial Sloan Kettering, are now using these tools to help clinicians manage paperwork and other things so they can kind of spend more time with their patients, as an example.
Okay, so what are you hearing from a lot of physicians and doctors when it comes to this? I mean, obviously, in some ways, I'm sure it can be helpful, but do many of them feel perhaps this is overstepping into their professional lane?
We're actually seeing pretty incredible partnership with clinicians around the country and the world. We developed this tool with, I think, almost 300 clinicians directly. And I think just pivoting to my personal experience. So last year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I'm fine now, thank goodness. But I actually relied on ChatGPT really heavily in my own process. I had an amazing team of doctors, but they're across a ton of different specialties. The time with them was super limited. And what I actually found was they were really supportive of me kind of coming into those appointments, being more of an empowered and knowledgeable advocate for myself, and frankly, asking them better questions and making better use of the time that we had together.
And glad you're okay, by the way, and glad it was helpful as it has been for so many people. But 5 years from now, what do we expect this to look like? I mean, AI has just sort of skyrocketed even in the last year or so, but 5 years from now, how do you think AI will play into healthcare decision making?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing that we're really focused on is educating people so they can take advantage of the tools as they exist in their pocket today. It's hard to predict, as you said, where this is going. The pace of innovation is kind of really blistering, but we're seeing kind of more, frankly, so much demand, and we hope that this can continue to really just help people in their everyday health. From my perspective, I also think on the frontier science side, drug discovery, and really helping kind of get people better treatments is, something that I personally really hope for in 5 years. But the future is of course just hard to predict.
Yeah, we really don't know.